let me demonstrate and explain how we can create a strong sense of three dimensions in our drawing, even though it's on a two-dimensional sheet of paper using the same black fine liner pen. So this is an Australian waratah. It's the state emblem of New South Wales where I live, and it's a very sculptural form, both the flower and also the leaves and the way they come out from the central stem. So it's a great subject to address this subject with, but also simply the challenge of drawing freehand with a black line, something such as this, and to get a sense of the shape. Because as well as outline, we're also going to be creating effect, and we're also going to be adding value, lights and darks, in such a way as to help create the sense of three dimension, of shifting form on the various leaves, on even just one leaf, but also then from leaf to leaf. And you're watching this demo at 1.25 times the actual drawing speed. So in real time, this took about 31 minutes to draw. You're watching it in closer to 25 minutes. So what I'm doing at the moment, at the start, is you can see I did a bit of a dotted line to get a sense of the shape of this top cluster of the flower of stamens, very pronounced, very individual stamens. And because they're so well defined and relatively large, I think for this drawing, where this is the focal point, I am required to put a fair bit of detail in. But as well as drawing them with some level of accuracy, the other thing when we consider drawing the overall effect is to see this spiraling of these stamens from the top, which is slightly in view. Because of the angle, the flower is slightly tilted towards us, so we can see the very top and a little over the rim, if you like, onto the other side. So we have all that, and then because the lower ones are starting to open, so they're not just pulling away from the central ball, but they're actually splitting, and the inner stamen section, the one that has the nectar on it, is coming out, is pronounced, and is slightly lighter, a slightly lighter pink in colour. And so these are all details we want to capture, but particularly this spiraling. And you might have noticed when I did that, if you like, original round ball dotted outline, I also did a few dotted lines that were spiraling down around the shape, and that was just to help me get a sense of where I was wanting to do things. I'm not being particularly exact in this, but you can see me with my finger on the reference to help me not lose track of what I'm looking at before I put it on the paper. Sometimes it's something as simple as this, which makes all the difference in being able to create a credible capture of our subject. The other thing right at this point that I'm aware of is that the shadows that are cast between these stamens are going to be visually a very important part of creating a sense of three dimensions of depth, because shadows such as we have here do tell us that this is going back in space in a way that the light cannot reach. So shadows invariably create a sense of three dimensions. Now, also pay attention to the top of this flower, and this is important not because it's the top, but because it's actually a bit further away. I've drawn the stamens much less exactly than I have where it's closer to us. And when I do the shadows, the values, I'll make them lighter as they get further away as well. And these are ways in which I'm going to create a sense of three dimensions, or one of the ways. And so now I'm doing these what are these things called? They're also a part of the flower because they're red, they're not leaves. Though if you take away all the colour out of this, it would be hard to tell the difference probably where these things, but these are basically the wrapping of the flower bud that open up first, and then the flower actually opens. And they also have a very characteristic shape and the way they bend over at the ends, and that bending over becomes more pronounced as they age and dry out somewhat. and they fold down around the top more and more. They're beautiful plants. They grow in the national park near where I live. They're up and down the east coast of Australia, particularly in the cooler regions. That's where they do best. And so I'm drawing them roughly exactly. I'm certainly using my reference very closely. I think I'm deciding whether to add an extra one there, and I did, because I didn't want the gap. I already had a gap on the other side, and I decided I would leave that. So now I've got my flower head drawn, and I'm working out what I'm doing now. So what I drew was the vein, the center vein of this central leaf. And I'm trying to now draw these in a way that I'm not compromising my ability to draw all of the leaves. While I'm not agonizing over exactness, I do want things, the same as with the flower head, to be approximately the same. And I find that if I draw the center vein first, then I can bring each side around it. And I'm going to make a difference how I draw. I'm going to have a difference between the way I draw the leaves that are closest and the ones that are further away, because that's going to be an important part of the sense of three dimensions. But first, I have to draw them. In many ways, this is a reasonably straightforward drawing. It looks complex, but in real time, this outline part only took me 11 minutes to do, even less with this quarter time extra speed put on. So the real time in this was the actual hatching, particularly of the leaves. So sometimes when we have a subject such as this, we have to be prepared to put the time in, even when we're going for a fairly brisk effect. We need to put the time in to what we're doing to get the overall effect. And I know that in the end, it's going to be the hatching that pulls the eye. See, at the moment, if you look at these leaves, they do look very flat. We don't really have a sense of them going back very far at all. Now, I haven't drawn the furthest ones back yet, but even so, with the ball on top, that feels a bit three-dimensional because we've got a few more clues there that the forms are changing as they go back. But that's less obvious with these leaves, and so they do appear more as if they're all on the same plane, whereas some of them are actually coming towards us significantly compared to others. But I am still, even at this stage, I'm looking at my reference and I'm filling the gaps the way the gaps are filled. And what I don't want to do, and this is why I need to keep looking at my reference, I don't want to fill all of the gaps completely, which is what will happen if I'm not careful. I'll end up with gaps that are all the same, and that's the last thing that I want. So now I'm starting to work on the shadows with some hatching. And because this is a very quite large and quite three-dimensional and quite sculptural form, it does cast a lot of very clear shadows. And so this now is what I'm doing. This is what I'm addressing. And I'm going for the darkest, most obvious shadows. And again, I'm using the reference as kind of a notional idea of what I'm doing. But I'm really taking that now and applying it with a fair bit of freedom in my drawing. The important thing is that I capture these shadows to reflect the curvature of the sepals. That's what they are. S-E-P-A-L-S, I think. If I'm wrong, please, someone will know, and please tell us in the comments. But I'm trying to reflect the curved position, shape, form of these sepals, and that's going to help a lot to start to give a sense of three dimensions when we look at this. Our hatching generally, I won't say always, but generally, almost always, I think needs to reflect in some way the underlying form of the object that we're putting the hatching onto. Then it's reinforcing the form, the three-dimensionality. It's not just adding value, it's not just adding darkness, but it's adding the topography of what we're looking at. And so I'm carefully looking to see what's happening. Now, it's a bit trickier with a pen than, say, a lead pencil, because with a lead pencil, with graphite, simply by pressing a bit more heavily and sometimes by rotating my pencil a bit, I can get some darker parts darker and some lighter parts lighter. But every mark I put on the paper with this pen is going to have exactly the same value, exactly the same black. So it's how I put the marks on and how I combine them, and then the relative effect they have on each other, that's going to create the effect. It's going to create a sense, I hope, of three dimensions. So still doing the sepals here. We're not doing the leaves at all. But it is also clearly, as far as style goes, it's going to be a fairly quick grab. It's not a botanical drawing by any stretch. We're trying to create a visual grab of the overall look and feel of a waratah. And that means we want to, I think, capture that strong sculptural feel that they have. And that partly comes from the very, very, for a flower, almost confronting three-dimensionality of it. It almost explodes at you when you look at it. And the contrast between the red and the leaves, the dark green of the leaves, is, I think, quite stunning. And quite amazing if you're lucky enough to come across them in the bush. Sadly, they are often poached, so to speak, if they're anywhere near civilization. And in some national parks, the rangers actually spray paint the flowers with blue paint to disfigure them enough to discourage people from stealing them. And that way, of course, they're still available for the birds, for the wildlife that feeds off the very large amount of nectar that they produce, and the seeds are also available to help the species survive in that area. And there are many different types of them. But this is probably my favourite one. This is the one that is the New South Wales state emblem. Some of them are more of a shrubby effect, and the bushes are more like shrubs, covered in smaller but softer looking flowers, sometimes going even to more of a pink than this strong red. So I need to start making some sort of commitment to these leaves, and I hesitated because I did know that it was going to be a fair bit of work. We are halfway through our time now, so basically half of this drawing was hatching the leaves. And so I start with a shadow, and I'm still not 100% sure whether I'm going to have to hatch all of the leaves at this point. I'm hoping I don't have to, but I'm just not so sure. However, I do end up just adding more and more hatching to the leaves as I went on, because as the drawing progressed, I thought, no, I think it really needs it to capture the contrast, the starkness, and most importantly, the form. And when we talk about three dimensions, we're talking about the form. What we see with the leaves at the moment is their shape. Now, shape is a two-dimensional outline. So we could cut these leaves out and they are a two-dimensional shape. But what we want to do is, even though we're putting them with our ink on a two-dimensional surface, we want to make them look like, feel like three-dimensional forms, because forms move in space. They move towards us and they move away from us. And that's what we need to capture. It also makes some things look closer to us than others. Now there is this vein down the middle of them, and I'm sort of hoping to leave a little bit to suggest that as well. Another important thing to do when we look at these shadows on these leaves, these dark green leaves, is to appreciate that if I look on any one leaf, all the parts that are shadowed, some parts are darker than others. And there's a couple of reasons for this. One is, in some of the cases, we're looking at shade, not shadow. Now, shadow is where something casts a shadow on something else. So that very first thing I did on that upper right leaf is a shadow. It's where the actual flower head is stopping the light from reaching the leaf underneath. But where the leaves are turned away from the light source, where they're turned away from the light source so the light can't reach them, that's actually shade. And the thing to remember is that shadow is darker than shade. Shade is actually a lighter value than shadow. But also depending where the object is with the shade or shadow on it, sometimes there's more light bouncing around that can reach into places not directly, and it creates a lighter effect on that spot. So that's the other thing to realize. And we don't think of this when we look at the leaves. We see that some parts are darker than others, but we don't see the subtlety of that. And what we want to do is try and capture that in our mark making. So I'm wanting to make some parts of these leaves darker than other parts. But I also want the darkest leaves to be the closest ones, because values also become lighter as they move away from us. Just there's a little bit more atmosphere that the light rays need to go through before they get to our retinas. And in that distance, they lose a little bit of the value. And so again, that's something that in our drawing we can manipulate to get a sense of 3 dimensions. I have quite a lot of videos on creating 3 dimensions, or some of them are called creating the effect of distance or drawing the effect of distance. So if this is something that you feel could work stronger in your drawings, then I suggest you have a little look in my, at this stage, something like 300 videos. And so you can see by the directions of my hatching, of my hatch lines, I'm trying to create a sense of curvature, of folding in the leaves, all of which help to give a sense of 3 dimensions. I'm pretty sure, a 0.3 millimeter pen for this drawing. It's, in my drawing, a relatively thick pen. So I realise now that on most of the leaves I need to have some sort of hatching marks. And so again now, I need to put the marks in such a way as to keep clarity from leaf to leaf. I need to always make sure that I adjust my values, or perhaps very slight gaps in where my lines are, so that we can tell what is one leaf and what is another leaf. Because if different forms begin to become entangled with each other, then that's going to make it very hard to be able to see the 3 dimensions. It's going to fight against creating an effect of 3 dimensions. And if you look at this leaf here, you can see what I'm doing in terms of what I'm looking at and how I try and create those values in a fairly rapid and deliberately imprecise style as part of the stylism of this drawing. If you've seen many of my videos, you'll know I'm often more precise than this, but I do love at times just playing fast and furious and just not focusing on precision as much as might be my more common way, but to just have some fun with movement and get a very different feel in my drawing. And if you're finding this interesting, please hit the like button for me. And if you'd like to have a go drawing this, I'll post it on my channel posts page, the old community page. And there should be a link in the description that will take you to it. If there's not, or if I get the link wrong, as I occasionally do, please tell me in the comment and I will fix it up for you. So if you've got half an hour, you can draw an Australian Waratah as well. And it's a great little subject to try. And why not give yourself a 30 or 45-minute time limit so you don't start to become agonizingly bogged down doing all those stamens, but you go for capturing the feel. And if we look at the top, if we look at that stamen cluster on top, I hope you agree that it does have a sense now of being a rounded ball, that just add in those very quick and similarly rough bits of shadow in between the stamens really help create a sense of roundness there. And it's because we created strong contrast in different parts. We didn't overdo it. We didn't do too much of the same in any one place. And overall now we have, I think, quite a strong sense that that's a ball. So these are the things that we need to explore. But I can promise one thing: as we draw, these things don't happen by accident. If we want to create certain effects, we need to be conscious of what marks am I going to use. And then I deliberately use them in a certain way. And then if they don't create the effect I want, if my drawing, say, doesn't look three-dimensional and I was really working on that, then I know that I need to keep exploring the way to use marks. And one very helpful thing is to find artists whose work does create visually the way you'd like your drawings to look, whatever that is, whether it's a sense of precision, whether it's a sense of three dimensions, whether it's a sense of value or drama or whatever, and work out why is this happening in their work. Because if it's a pen drawing, they're using the same materials, paper and a pen. So how are they putting the marks on the paper to create the impact, the overall finish in their drawing that you would like to have in yours? Don't think that you're not capable of working this out, because you are. And also what we can't see when we look at someone else's work is we can't see all the trial and error that they took to get to that place in their drawing as well. We can often think that if we can't do it straight away, we're wasting our time. And that's just not true. So now I'm doing a little bit of definition on these closest leaves, and that will help them to feel closer to us. Well, I hope it will anyway. And so getting pretty close to the end now, checking to see are there parts I've missed. I almost forgot to put that leaf on in the first place. Watching the way leaves twist and turn and the way that changes how they look is really important when we draw a plant such as this. But even on a plant that might have more generalized leaf structures, even paying attention to those few closest ones, so we really give them all of that nature of the way they twist and turn and catch the light, at least in detail on a few, is really important then to be able to generalize that and to see the effect. I'm just adding a little bit more here, but you can see I've slowed down slightly, I hope, just to think, what am I doing? I don't want to do too much. I pushed a few more of those marks in the upper left of the orb for shadow, but I didn't want to go too much or too dark. I tried to keep the effect a bit lighter. And I think that's it. It's as good as done. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. I hope you found this interesting and helpful. It's really possible to create a sense of three dimensions, even using black ink. Look at those furthest leaves, how they do look further away. I've used the same pen, but I've created a lighter effect. That certainly feels like it's more in the distance. I've also simplified it a little bit in that lower right section because I felt too much more leaf. If I tried to draw all that was in the reference, it would end up just becoming a mass that was hard not to see. We're not slaves to our photos. People are going to be seeing our drawing, not our reference. Well, except for me, you get to see both. But I do want to use all the good qualities in my photo that made me want to draw it, but I want to improve on it in any way I can, compositionally, value-wise, whatever, in my drawing. So why not give it a go? But whatever you draw, however it looks, however many dimensions you manage to put in it, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.